Okay, hello everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Okay, so sorry about the couple of days delay. Um, I had an issue with my computer, but then I have it fixed now, so that's good. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so in this video, we're going to be talking more about variables, right? Now, so far we've seen that we can declare a variable of data type int, right? And we can give it a name of, let's say, number. This is the name we're coming up with. So this is declaring a variable declaration, right? All we are saying is, all we are telling the computer is, reserve a space in your memory and then give it a name of number, and only allow integers to be stored in there. This int means integer. So we can say now we can initialize this variable. We can say number is equal to 2. In other words, we are putting 2 in that slot we just created here. We are initializing this variable. This is the process. This process is called variable initialization. So we know that. Now, when you're writing programs, right, you would need to store all kinds of data, right? All kinds of data. Now, this is an integer, right? For example, if you're writing a program that allows users to type in their name so that it can be displayed, you would need to store, in this case, strings. Strings being a series, or basically characters joined up together, okay? Like a string of data, characters joined together. If you're writing a program that, let's say, allowed users to type in their name their age so that it can be displayed, then you need to store numbers, right? In this case, you need to store integers. If you're writing a program that needed to, let's say, store how much people earn, let's say, every week, then you need to store numbers also. But then the type of numbers would be, let's say, decimals, numbers with decimal places, right? So basically, there are all kinds of data. If you're writing a program that accepted, let's say, initials, then you need to store characters, right? There are all kinds of data that your program is going to accept in, and you'd have to represent all these all this data. You'd have to represent it. You'd have to tell the computer, to save it in its memory and only allow this kind of data to be stored in these variables you're going to create. So there are so many data types in Java, right? But let's narrow in to numbers, okay? And even with numbers, let's narrow in to integers, okay? Now there are 4 types of integer data types in Java, okay? Now you'd ask yourself, well, why is there not just one type of data type called, let's say, integer? There are 4 types of integer data types, and the reason why they have 4 types is because they all deal with specific ranges. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be referring to, or I'm going to talk about one of them, or the first of them, which is called byte. Okay, byte is an integer data type. You can basically declare a variable of type byte and store in a number, but then it has a range. Okay, so I'm declaring a variable of type byte. I'm going to call it also number. Okay, all I've done is the same as what I did before with int. I'm saying the computer should reserve a space in its memory, call that space number, and only allow numbers that are of type byte to be stored in that slot. Okay, so I mentioned that each of these data types have a range, right? So again, it's a type of integer data type, but then the reason why they are basically grouped is because, or basically separated, is because they have specific ranges. For a byte, I'm going to use a comment here to type in the range. For a byte, it can only store numbers in the range of -128, okay, to +127. So if you wanted to create a program that, let's say, dealt with only these numbers, then you're better off, or your program is going to actually run faster, because you're only using, or you're only creating variables that use a specific amount of or that accepts a specific amount of or a specific range. Okay, there's no need declaring or using a variable that accepts something bigger. Since you know you're going to use numbers like this, then you want to go ahead and declare variables of type byte. So byte, you can only store numbers from -128 to 127. Now, if you look at the title of this program, it's called Primitive Integer Data Types Byte, right? So one, we know byte is an integer data type, but it's also primitive. It's called primitive because Now this number, right, now it's a variable, right? We can initialize this number with a value of, let's say, 5. Now because 5 is in this range, it's not going to complain. So let's first of all system.out.println what's in number, right? And when I compile this and I run it, we can see that it just printed out 5 over here. 5 is in the range of this, so it has no problem initializing number, with 5 or up to 5. Now it's called primitive because this number, okay, can accept in one value here. It can accept in one value of type byte, okay. So basically, it's called primitive because once you declare this byte, basically is called primitive. It's a primitive data type because once you declare a variable of type byte, it can only store a value, and that value can't do special things. Or basically, once you declare a variable of type byte, that variable, okay, can't store special values. There are variables called class type variables, which we are going to get into, that can store values of complex type. Okay, it can store not just a simple type like the 5. It can store a whole object, and that object can do stuff, and it has more information about it. It can store a value that is complex, a value that has values about it, and a value that has attributes about it, and a value that can actually do stuff. But it's primitive. Now primitive means old, primitive means ancient, so you can think of this as being some kind of simple data type. Okay, so it's called a primitive data type because once you declare a variable with byte with a primitive data or once you declare a variable of a primitive data type, that variable can only store a simple value, in this case byte. It can't store complex values like objects. Okay, you don't know more about objects, but you will learn more about them. Okay, so that's why it's called primitive. It can only store one single value, and it can't store complex object or complex values, or values. Okay, so it can't store complex values. That's what I meant to say. Yeah, so that's why it's called primitive. Okay, so just know that byte is one of the integer data types. It's primitive, we just mentioned that, and it has a range. You can only store numbers in the range of -128 to 127. Okay, so over here, if I try to store 5, it's fine. If I try to store 126, it's fine. When I compile this, it has no problem, and I run it, it's all right. Okay, but as soon as I type in something outside of the range, let's say 128, and I compile this, it says possible loss of precision, right? It's saying that this variable was declared of type byte. It can only store numbers from -128 to 127. If you are forcing me to store 128 in over here, then because I can't store 128, I'm forced to cut off 1 and store 127. I'm forced to basically subtract 1 from this and store 127. And if I do that, you will lose data. Okay, so it's telling you that if I do that, there's going to be a possible loss of precision or data. So in that case, it's not going to do it. Okay, it's saying, okay, I'm not going to do this unless you only store numbers in my range. So that's what it's saying now. So in order to fix it, I need to basically store something in its range, -128 to 127. Compile it, and it says, okay, I can store 127. I can display it. If you try to go outside of basically outside of this, so -129, for example, it's going to complain and say again, okay, it says that, okay, you declare this variable of type byte. Okay, it's requiring a byte. I said I'm requiring a byte, but what I found was a different variable of a different type. It found something else. Okay, and we'll talk about this more. Okay, but then it found that it's requiring a byte, and it didn't find a byte. It found something else. So it's saying, okay, I can only accept in values in the range of -128 to 127. If you're forcing me to store -127, then I'm going to subtract 1 from 129 and store 128. And store -128, what I can store. So in that case, it's telling you that when I do that, you will lose data. So that's why it's saying possible loss of precision. So because it doesn't want you to lose any data or lose any value from what you're trying to store in it, it's telling you, please make sure you put in values in the range of -128 to 127. So in order to be safe, I type in a value that's in the range of a byte, and then I compile it. I'm fine. So bytes are or a byte is one of the integer data types. It's primitive and it has a range of -1 and 28 to 127. So this is one of the types of data that you're going to learn, and I hope you got it. Okay. If you have any questions, please comment down below, and I'll do everything to respond to them. Thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time with the next video as always. All right then. Bye bye.